Esteemed visitors, welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Joanne Smedley, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1, Brian Moore. We warmly welcome the family of Private Donald Ewen Ross, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors. Please stand and join in the singing of the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Donald Ross. Donald Ewen Ross was born in 1874, one of 10 children of Alexander and Mary Ross of Penshurst in Victoria. He attended Penshurst State School and afterwards became a grazier. Around 1907, he took up a selection at Deervale near Dorrigo in New South Wales, northern Tableland. It is likely that he worked it as a dairy and ran maize and a few cereal crops. According to a newspaper article printed 9 years later, Donald was well known for his worth as a resident, appreciated within the rural community of Dorrigo. Donald enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force at Liverpool near Sydney in October 1915. After a period of training at Holsworthy Camp, he embarked for Egypt with a reinforcement group for the 4th Battalion. By the time he arrived in April 1916, the Gallipoli campaign was over, and the Australian force was undergoing a major restructure before it embarked for fighting in France. As part of the doubling up of the AIF, Donald was transferred to the newly formed 56th Battalion in camp at Ferry Post on the Suez Canal. He spent the following weeks training with his new unit before it embarked for France in April 1916. Along with the rest of the 5th Division, the 56th Battalion entered the trenches of the Western Front for the first time outside the village of Fleury on the Franco-Belgian border. Its flat terrain and high water table made the area unsuitable for any major offensive action, so both the British and the Germans treated it as a nursery to train new units arriving in France. But although the focus of British operations by this time was further to the south on the Somme, the inexperienced troops of the 5th Division were committed to a feint attack at the Fleury sector after just 2 weeks in France. On the afternoon of the 19th of July 1916, Australian and British troops assaulted the German trenches outside the village of Fromelles. In a costly and unsuccessful endeavour, the 5th Division suffered over 5,500 casualties, killed, missing, wounded and taken prisoner in less than 24 hours of fighting. Among the casualties was Donald Ross. He was killed outright by a German artillery shell that exploded in an Australian communication trench early on the morning of the 20th of July. Aged 41 at the time of his death, Donald was buried at the Anzac ceremony near the village of Sayeux-Salis. His death was keenly felt within the small rural farming community of Dorrigo, where his name appears on the local war memorial. Donald Ross is also listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Donald Ewen Ross, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you a very good evening.